Captain Tosk observed the holographic display, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he studied the details of Southport Preparatory School. The structure, surrounded by dense forests and towering mountains, was nearly invisible to human detection systems. More importantly, it housed exactly what the Drax Reavers needed: 28 young humans, isolated from their adult counterparts and easily contained. The scout officer zoomed in further, revealing sleeping children in neatly arranged dormitories. "They won't even know what hit them," he muttered, his voice filled with satisfaction. Tosk's scaled fingers drummed against the console as he considered the implications. Humans were a new product in the cosmic bazaar, and their unique physiology made them highly desirable. Their soft, pliable skin, erratic emotions, and unpredictable behavior fascinated traders across the stars. But what made this raid even more lucrative was the age of the targets. Juvenile humans were easier to break, their minds more adaptable to conditioning. A few cycles of training, and they would be ready for sale on the black pentaset auctions of the Solarian Commerce Bazaar. However, Tosk was not a fool. He had studied human behavior, their history, and their responses to threats. The species was known for its chaotic nature, sometimes docile, sometimes violently unpredictable. However, Earth's military forces were still primitive by galactic standards, and their planetary defense systems were laughably inadequate. The Drax Reavers had conducted dozens of successful abductions across the galaxy, and Earth should have been no different. Still, something in the back of his mind gnawed at him. Humans were known for their fierce protection of their young. The records showed that in cases where children were taken, the species reacted with a level of aggression that defied logic. But surely, that was just fear-driven posturing. Earth had no fleet capable of mounting a serious pursuit, and even if they did, the Drax would be long gone before any meaningful response could form. He turned to his crew. 3 hours until nighttime. Prepare the stealth shuttles. This will be a clean operation. No survivors to raise alarms. The bridge hummed with activity as the Reavers set their plan into motion. The 4 black shuttles descended through Earth's atmosphere, their advanced cloaking systems rendering them invisible to both radar and human eyes. As they landed in the sports field of Southport Preparatory School, the cold of their engines seeped into the damp grass, frosting it over in an eerie display. The Reavers disembarked swiftly, their gravity dampeners ensuring silent movement across the ground. They had conducted raids like this on countless worlds, and their efficiency was unmatched. Inside the dorms, the team moved with precision. The first room was easy. 6 children lay asleep, unaware of the intruders. A quick pulse from their neural disruptors sent the children into unconsciousness, their bodies slumping back onto the beds. The Reavers worked quickly, securing each child in a transport harness before carrying them out. But when they entered the second room, everything changed. A boy, no older than 14, sat upright in his bed, a small light illuminating the book in his hands. His eyes widened as the Reavers stepped inside, their alien forms casting grotesque shadows against the dim glow. Before they could react, he hurled his heavy reading device at the nearest Reaver, striking him in the face with enough force to stagger him. "They're here! Everyone, wake up! Call the police!" the boy shouted, his voice piercing the night air. Alarms blared through the building, and the Reavers cursed under their breath. They had expected passive, unconscious victims, not a species that would fight back so quickly. The boy's defiance was an anomaly. Most species they had encountered would freeze in fear or flee at the sight of the Drax. But this human child had not only resisted, but had also alerted the others. The team leader adjusted his disruptor to maximum power. "No more stun settings. Use full force," he ordered. They stormed through the halls, grabbing children as they bolted from their rooms. Some struggled, kicking and biting, while others attempted to hide. One girl even managed to smash a Reaver's environmental mask with a metal water container. The operation had been meant to be clean, but now chaos had erupted. Captain Pento stared at the emergency report, his fingers tightening around the tablet. His home world, Earth, had been violated in a way that should have been impossible. The Drax Reavers, a ruthless but relatively minor faction in the galactic underworld, had taken 15 human children. He had expected a trade dispute, a smuggling ring, or even an invasion. But this was something else entirely. "Tsar, get me everything we have on Drax Reaver activities in this sector," he ordered, his voice tight with barely restrained fury. But Tsar didn't respond. Pentos turned, frowning at his second-in-command. The Vaxarian stood frozen, his smooth skin a dim silver, his 8 eyes blinking rapidly in distress. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances, sensing something was wrong. "Tsar, what's wrong?" Pentos asked, stepping toward his friend. The alien stumbled back, his voice trembling. They took human children," he whispered, his mandibles twitching. "Not adults, not workers or soldiers, but children." Pentos' expression darkened. "Yes, and we're going to get them back." Tsar shook his head. "You don't understand. Nobody takes human children. It's the first rule we learn in the academy." He took a shaky breath. 15 cycles ago, a Falarian slaver took 5 human children by mistake. They didn't know what they were dealing with. The humans. They did something no species has ever done before. A single human ship chased the Falarians across 24 systems, without stopping, without sleeping. The captain didn't even know the children, but he hunted them down anyway. Pentos' jaw clenched. And they wiped out the entire Falarian slaver armada. Not just the ship that took the children, but every Falarian slaver they could find. The Falarians were one of the most powerful slave-trading empires in the sector. Now they're past tense. Pentos looked around the bridge. His alien crew, seasoned warriors from multiple species, were visibly shaken. "This isn't just a kidnapping," Tsar continued. "It's a declaration of war, and the Drax Reavers have no idea what's coming." Pentos exhaled sharply. "Then we need to warn them, before it's too late." Within hours of the abduction, Earth erupted into motion. The Interstellar Unity Brigade had expected a military response, but what followed was something far beyond their projections. Across the planet, ships of every kind, civilian, commercial, and outdated, were being refitted and launched. The government scrambled to organize a formal rescue effort, but it was the people who moved first. On the outskirts of a small town, Ashley Jones finished packing her small cargo ship, Radiant's Destiny. She wasn't a soldier or a trained investigator. She was a teacher, the kind of woman who spent her days reading bedtime stories and organizing school field trips. Now, she was preparing to chase down alien slavers across the stars. She zipped up her backpack, filled with children's clothes, medical supplies, and a tablet loaded with stories and games. If they found the children, she wanted to be ready. "Mrs. Jones, we're heading into dangerous space," the ship's captain, a former cargo pilot, said as he double-checked their navigation systems. "What exactly is your plan if we find these kids?" Ashley looked at him, her eyes steady. "They'll need someone who knows how to talk to them. They'll need comfort, routine, something familiar. I can help." Across the planet, others were making similar decisions. A retired nurse converted her life savings into medical kits, determined to be there if the children were injured. A child psychologist spent the night learning how to operate a ship's communication system, hoping to contact the captives. Parents of the missing children uploaded photos, stories, and favorite foods to every available network, desperate to give any advantage to the search. As the fleet assembled, Tsar watched the growing armada with a mixture of awe and fear. "They keep saying, 'These are our children,' but most of these humans have never even met the Taken," a dock worker muttered on a distant station. Tsar's voice was grim. "Because to them, they are." Captain Tusk stormed onto the bridge, his claws scraping against the metal floor as he paced furiously. The Solarian Commerce Bazaar, usually a haven for illicit transactions, had gone silent. No buyers were responding, no brokers were negotiating, only silence. His communications officer, pale with fear, handed him a message. The words were clear. "Return them immediately, if you want to live." "This is ridiculous," Tusk snarled, slamming his fist against the console. "We've done this 100 times. Why is this time different? His tactical officer hesitated before speaking. Sir, the children, they're awake, and they're causing problems. Tusk turned sharply. What do you mean? The stasis pods were supposed to keep them unconscious until arrival at Solarian, but they've already disabled 4 ship systems. We lost auxiliary power in engineering after one of them tampered with the control panel. And several guards were injured when the children coordinated an attack during transport. Tusk's tail lashed. How? They're just children. The officer looked away. They watch escape narratives. They learn to resist. Our guards underestimated them. Tusk growled. Restrain them. Increase security. The officer shook his head. We tried. They work together. They find weaknesses. One of them even reprogrammed a maintenance drone to block our corridors. Tusk turned to his ship's AI. What is the status of the FTL drive? Delayed. The children damaged the primary stabilizer. Our engineers are working, but repairs may take hours. Tusk's eyes narrowed. We need buyers. We need to get rid of them before Earth's fleet arrives. Another message appeared on the screen. This one from the Chronarchs, a neutral and ancient species known for recording galactic history. Their crystalline form pulsed with warning. This is a formal alert. Your actions have triggered historical protocols. 7 civilizations have gone extinct for this mistake. We are shutting down all trade routes in this sector. Tusk felt the cold weight of realization settle in his gut. The children weren't just resisting. They were becoming a liability. And worse, they were drawing attention. The storm was coming, and he was running out of time. Across the stars, the Drax Reavers' reckless act sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The Trade Federation, known for its neutrality and profit-driven pragmatism, issued a rare and urgent warning. Human children are not a product. Return them now, or face destruction. Even the Chronarchs, an ancient species that had never taken sides in any conflict, broadcasted a formal alert detailing the historical consequences of capturing human young. Tusk's frustration boiled over. They're just primitive humans. Their ships barely reach their own moon. The tactical officer hesitated before responding. Sir, they're coming. Hundreds of ships. More launching every hour. They're not stopping to rest or refuel. They're pushing their engines beyond safety limits. It's like they don't care if they survive the journey. Tusk's claws dug into the console as another message appeared. This one from a slaver faction that had once been an ally. You've doomed us all. Return the children before it's too late. But it was already too late. The human fleet was closing in, and the Drax Reavers had no idea what they had unleashed. Zar turned to Pentos, his skin still pale with fear. They don't understand what they've done. They think this is just a trade gone wrong. They don't realize that once humans decide their children are in danger, there are no limits to what they'll do. Tusk stared at the screen, watching as more ships appeared in the distance. The storm was coming, and for the first time in his long career, he felt something foreign. Fear. The holding cells aboard the Drax Reavers ship had been designed to contain even the most dangerous of captives, strong enough to withstand physical force, lined with reinforced barriers, and monitored by a network of surveillance drones. But Captain Tusk had underestimated the ingenuity of human children. The security footage showed them moving with eerie coordination, their youthful energy no longer wasted on panic or fear. Instead, they had transformed their captivity into a battlefield of sabotage and psychological warfare. Subject 7, Andrew, was the first to act. While the Reavers assumed the children were merely entertaining themselves with loud, repetitive songs, they failed to recognize the deeper purpose behind the noise. The children weren't just singing to stay calm, they were using the melodies as signals. Every shift in rhythm or pitch meant something to them, a hidden code that allowed them to communicate without the guards realizing it. The Reavers' translation software had flagged the lyrics as harmless, but the real message was in the timing. When the wheels on the bus repeated in an endless loop, it wasn't just a childish distraction. It was a countdown. A way to track the passage of time and anticipate when their kidnappers would be most vulnerable. The cultural expert, who had been quietly observing the children's behavior, finally voiced his concerns. "Sir, I've been studying their entertainment and news broadcasts. They're young, but they're trained from birth. They have something called stranger danger protocols. Their schools practice lockdown drills. Even their games teach them how to resist capture." Tosk listened, his tail stiffening. This wasn't just defiance. It was a calculated effort to undermine their control. The children's most recent act of sabotage had left the security team scrambling. Using a crude but effective tool fashioned from their food trays, they had managed to short out a power conduit in the lower deck. The damage wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a sign of growing resistance. The Reavers had dealt with rebellious captives before, but never children. Most species young were passive, easily subdued, and too frightened to act. These humans, however, were different. They were working together, using their knowledge of Earth's safety drills to disrupt the ship's systems. Tosk's guards were growing uneasy. The children didn't behave like prisoners. They didn't cry or beg. Instead, they laughed, whispered in hushed tones, and tested the limits of their confinement. One of them had even managed to loosen the bolts on a ventilation panel, an act that could lead to a full-scale breach if they kept at it. Tosk watched the footage again, his scaled fingers tightening into fists. The children's behavior was unsettling. They weren't just fighting back, they were organizing. And if they were using Earth safety drills as a guide, then they had likely already devised a way to escape. The realization sent a chill through him. He had always believed children were the easiest to take. But now, he was starting to understand why every species in the galaxy feared human young. Captain Tosk's frustration boiled over as he paced the bridge, his claws clicking against the metal floor. The Reavers had always operated in the shadows, striking swiftly and vanishing before their victims could react. But now, they were trapped in a nightmare of their own making. Every attempt to contact a broker was met with silence or outright rejection. Tosk slammed his fist on the console. "This is impossible," he snarled. "We've done this 100 times. Why is this time different?" His communications officer hesitated before responding. "Sir, the humans. They're coming for them, fast." Tosk turned to the tactical officer, who was frantically scanning the long-range sensors. "How many ships?" "Over 330 civilian vessels," the officer replied, his voice trembling. "They're not military, but they're coordinating like one." Tosk's tail lashed in agitation. "They can't track us. We disabled their primitive tracking systems." The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, we believe the children sent them messages. We found communication logs in the medical bay. Coordinates, times, even details about our hyperspace jumps. They used the ship's vibrations to calculate our course." Tosk's eyes narrowed. "You're saying children figured out how to navigate space?" The cultural expert, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "It's not just navigation. Their education includes problem-solving, logic, and teamwork. They learn these skills from a young age, and now, they're applying them against us." Another alarm blared. The security team scrambled to the footage, revealing a new breach. The children had managed to tamper with the air circulation system, causing a sudden pressure imbalance that forced the vents to open. The ship shuddered as the emergency protocols kicked in. "They're turning this ship against us," one of the guards muttered. Tosk turned back to the communications console, his mind racing. He needed to find a buyer, someone who would take the children off his hands before the human fleet arrived. But every message he sent was ignored or met with hostility. Even the most ruthless slavers refused to engage. "They think we're cursed," one of his officers whispered. "No one wants to be associated with this." Tosk clenched his jaw. He had always believed humans were weak, their technology inferior, and their society fragmented. But now, he saw the truth. They weren't just coming for their children. They were coming to erase the Drax Reavers from existence. The sight that greeted Captain Tosk as the Drax Reavers ship dropped out of hyperspace near the abandoned mining station was unlike anything he had ever seen. Hundreds of ships, cargo freighters, passenger shuttles, even outdated private vessels, surrounded the station, their presence forming a vast unbreakable wall. These were not warships, not military vessels with advanced weaponry or battle-hardened crews. They were civilian ships, piloted by ordinary humans, teachers, nurses, librarians, and parents who had spent their lives protecting children, not engaging in interstellar combat. The Reavers' sensors struggled to keep up with the sheer volume of incoming ships. Every human vessel was broadcasting the same message on every frequency: return our children. We will not stop until they are home. The translation software barely needed to function. Tosk could see the determination in their eyes, the way they moved in perfect coordination despite having no formal command structure. They weren't just following orders. They were united by something far more powerful. A small transport ship approached directly, its captain stepping forward on the comms. "This is Lisa Wilson." The woman's voice rang through the speakers. "I taught 5 of the children you took. You have 15 minutes to surrender them unharmed." Tosk laughed, though the sound came out more like a growl. "A teacher?" he scoffed. "You think a civilian can threaten us?" But his tactical officer's voice was tight with fear. "Sir, you don't understand. I've been monitoring their communications. That woman isn't just a teacher. She's one of many. There's a nurse who once treated a few of the children, a librarian who used to read to another, and a bus driver who took half of them to school every day." Tosk turned to the security feeds, watching as the human ships maneuvered into formation. They weren't just forming a blockade. They were positioning themselves to cut off every possible escape route. And then he saw it. The civilian ships weren't preparing weapons. They were pushing their engines beyond safe limits, burning them out in a desperate attempt to reach the Reavers before they could flee again. "They're willing to die," the science officer whispered. "They know if they overload their engines, they won't survive the journey." Tosk's claws dug into the console. He had always believed that fear ruled weaker species. But these humans weren't afraid. They were something far worse, unrelenting. And for the first time in his life, he understood why every species in the galaxy feared human children. Not because they were dangerous on their own, but because they made the humans behind them unstoppable. Lisa Wilson moved through the Drax Reavers ship, with a calm determination that belied the tension in the air. The alien guards, still in shock from the sudden arrival of the human fleet, barely reacted as she passed. She didn't need to be escorted. She knew exactly where she was going. The children were waiting, and she wasn't going to let anything keep her from them. As the cell door slid open with a hiss, she took a step inside, her breath catching at the sight before her. The 15 children huddled together, their eyes wide but unbroken. They weren't crying, weren't cowering in fear. They were watching her with cautious hope, their small hands gripping each other's as they stood ready. Lisa was the first to recognize her. "Mrs. Wilson," she whispered, blinking as if afraid the woman might vanish. Lisa knelt, opening her arms. "I came here to bring you home. The whole Earth came to find you." The moment the words left her mouth, the children rushed forward, wrapping her in a group hug. She held them close, her heart pounding at the warmth of their small bodies, the sound of their breathing, real, alive, safe. Behind her, more familiar figures stepped in. The school nurse, the librarian, and the bus driver who used to greet each child with a smile every morning. They carried backpacks filled with blankets, snacks, and stuffed animals, things that would remind the children of home. Captain Tosk watched from the doorway, confusion and disbelief etched into his scaled features. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to a nearby guard. "They sent civilians? Where are the soldiers?" The human beside him, a nurse who had once treated one of the children for a scraped knee, smiled grimly. "You still don't understand, do you?" she asked. "We're not here because we were ordered to be. We're here because we promised to protect them. And that promise doesn't end just because they're in space." Tosk turned to the other guards. "They're just a handful of humans. How did they find us?" A soldier standing nearby chuckled. "You can thank the kids for that. Those songs they kept singing, they were counting down the hours based on the ship's engine vibrations. They figured out our hyperspace jumps and sent the coordinates back. And Andrew, he used to build model rockets in his free time. He recognized the ship's systems and led the sabotage. Tusk's mind reeled. The children had been working against them from the start. They had turned their captivity into a mission, using everything they had learned on Earth to outmaneuver an interstellar slaver crew. And now their people had come for them, not just military forces, but ordinary humans who had risked everything to bring them home. In the grand hall of the Galactic Peace Tribunal headquarters, a gathering of species that had long dictated the rules of interstellar conduct sat in uneasy silence. The abduction of human children had shattered their assumptions, forcing them to confront a truth they had long ignored. The official guidelines for contact with Earth were being rewritten in real time, with new protocols flashing onto the central display. At the top of the list, bold and unyielding, the words were clear. Under no circumstances are human children to be targeted, threatened, or harmed. Doing so will result in an immediate and overwhelming response from not just human military forces, but from every human within reach. There is no defense against a species willing to cross galaxies, burn out their ships, and sacrifice everything to protect not just their own young, but any child in danger. Representatives from every spacefaring race exchanged wary glances. The Falarians had learned this lesson the hard way. Their once mighty slaver empire reduced to a cautionary tale. The Drax Reavers had now joined them, their ship seized and repurposed as a museum, a grim reminder of the consequences of underestimating human resilience. The children's scratched messages still adorned the walls of the holding cells, their words preserved for all to see. Mom and Dad, if you come across this, we are doing well. We are holding together, and we recall the emergency drills. The cultural experts among the gathered species had spent years studying human behavior, but only now did they truly grasp the depth of what they had failed to understand. Human society was built on an unshakable principle. Children were not just the future but the core of everything. Their protection was not a military directive or a diplomatic obligation. It was instinct, a force that defied logic. Other species protected their own young, their own bloodlines, and their own breeding clusters. Humans protected all children, regardless of relation, regardless of risk. Even the most hardened traders and warlords recognized the shift in galactic policy. The Trade Federation issued a new rule. Any vessel suspected of trafficking human children will be denied docking rights across all member worlds. The Chronarchs, known for their neutrality, recorded the event as a formal warning. The Elorians, the Spatial Dominion, and the neutral colonies all followed suit, ensuring that no slaver, no pirate, no faction would ever again dare to take human children. And in the years that followed, the story spread across the stars. It was told in commerce bazaars, in military briefings, and in the training of young officers. The tale of 15 human children who had turned captivity into resistance, who had used their education, their teamwork, and their unbreakable bond to outmaneuver an interstellar slaver crew. And the story of the humans who had crossed the galaxy to bring them home. Not just the military, but the teachers, the nurses, the librarians, and the ordinary people who had risked everything. Captain Tusk, now a prisoner aboard the Astral Defender, listened to the reports with growing dread. He had once believed humans to be weak and primitive. But now, he understood why the galaxy feared them. Because when it came to their children, there was no limit to what they would do.